All right, guys, welcome back to the Good Company podcast. This is episode 10, the season ender. And we're here with our managing partner, owner, and head underwriter, head of the committee, John Child, along with my co-host here, Ryan Comesso, just to kind of discuss some different things that maybe not every borrower is going to have the intricate knowings of what goes on in the underwriting process or kind of what decisions are being made. I know that, a lot of we've gotten some feedback in the comments and things like that about just kind of peeling back the curtain on some of the, underwriting things and kind of what goes into some of those decisions. So we want to break it down, a little bit for you here. John also has a long-standing career with our other, managing partner, Christian, who we had earlier this season in terms of doing, high-priced flips and a lot of really nice, short-town, beautiful homes. So we'll get into that pretty early. But good morning, John. How we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's good to finally get you.
Last one of the year.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like we've been talking about it for weeks, but I'm glad we're able to finally get on the schedule.
Yeah, definitely.
Making the time.
I guess we'll just start with you personally. Your kind of background. We explained it a little bit in Christian's episode, but, just kind of give us a background on, how you got started, where you came from, the kind of, and, how the creation of First Equity came about and whatnot, and just kind of, give us an idea how all that started.
Sure. Yeah, no problem at all. My background out of school was really, I started my career on Wall Street, working at Morgan Stanley, where I worked there for about 15 years, mostly in sales, trading, equity derivatives. So not really in the mortgage or real estate space per se, but I would say, First Equity was kind of born out of the 2008 mortgage crisis, which is kind of how I transitioned out of when I left Morgan Stanley. I had partnered up with Christian, who you guys mentioned earlier, my partner, in First Equity funding. And that's how the company was kind of started. And I guess I can kind of go through that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So basically, when back in 2008 during the mortgage crisis, default rates were extremely high. There's a lot of non-performing mortgages in the market trading at really, really deep discounts. So Christian had approached me while I was still at Morgan Stanley, and we started talking about how we could potentially take advantage of this opportunity that was out there since these notes were trading at such deep discounts. So ultimately, we ended up starting a fund, and the first business we started at First Equity was, other than the traditional conventional lending business, which was what Christian always did, was investing in non-performing residential whole loans. So that's what we set up ourselves for initially, and that's how we initially invested.
Okay.
And from there, that's evolved into where we are today.
Right.
And I can kind of walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, and then how did you go from going into non-performing loans and all that kind of stuff, and then how did that kind of transition into creating a niche lending company kind of as we are that kind of hard money, quote unquote? How did that kind of transition to that?
Yeah. So what happened when we were buying these non-performing resi whole loans, often we ended up taking over the properties that secured these notes.
Sure.
Because we were always it was really a workout strategy where we were trying to make, do modifications, do, deed and liens, work with the homeowners to try to come up with a solution, because they very often couldn't afford to stay in the house. And what happened often is we'd end up taking over these properties, and what we would do is try to fix them up a little bit to maximize our resale, to help out the returns of the fund. So that's kind of how we ended up becoming, real estate investors ourselves. And that's how we first cut our teeth and learned about kind of the fixing a home up to maximize resale. And along the way, we realized too that a lot of people kind of like us, or, real estate investors, didn't really have access to funds very easily. Christian knew from his own background in conventional world that a lot of banks would just not do certain types of loans, certainly fixed flip type loans, or with real estate investors where they couldn't document income.
Right.
And it just didn't really make sense to Christian and I. And that's kind of where we got started, and when we ultimately set up a fund to basically lend to real estate investors.
Okay. And was that your first real foray into real estate pretty much, or had you done anything prior to getting involved with First Equity, personally, or?
Yeah, no, that was, I always had an interest in real estate from afar, not really being involved with it hands-on, because like I said, I was really working up at Morgan Stanley. So that was really my first go at it in terms of getting, rolling up my sleeves and getting involved with real estate and I guess lending as well. And that's kind of where it all started. And yeah, from there, we've since, started our own construction company, and we do a lot of spec build, fix flipping ourselves, in addition to lending to people like ourselves.
Love it.
And then how, like, going from no experience and then diving into this kind of, new world, if you will, how did it kind of, was it building the team and, finding a guy like Greg and like kind of going through those early, flips, like who was doing, the work for you guys, in those early days? Was it just you and Christian, like going in there and doing some minor stuff, or did you kind of subcontracted it out?
Yeah, we were mainly subcontracting it out to local, general contractors. But we quickly realized, especially when we went to do our first new build, that it really wasn't going to be profitable enough using outside general contractors with what you had to pay to get that done. So that's when we decided, hey, after we did our first one in Avon, which ended up working out fine, and we did okay, especially considering it was our very first one. But we realized that to really do this efficiently and effectively, that we'd have to start our own construction company, which is when we were able to hire Greg Helwig, who now is our project manager. I mean, our model still is very much a sub model. We don't have a large staff. We have a couple people working for us. But that's kind of how we started the First Equity Homes, our construction company.
Yeah. And now is it, you guys, obviously you've been doing, short town homes for, the duration of the company. Is that kind of still where you see it in the future, staying, along the short towns, locally to us, or is it maybe getting more expansive into, some two families or whatever around, Monmouth County?
Yeah, I would say as far as our construction company goes, we'd probably like to just stay fairly local. We used to be pretty active up in North Jersey too, up in the Westfield Summit area. Partly, I guess, because my brother is a realtor up there, and he kind of has his ear to the ground up there in terms of finding opportunities. But it was a little hectic and a little hard doing that from down here. Yeah. So I think we're going to probably stick closer to the shore area. We kind of go as far south as Point Pleasant, I'd say, is really kind of our southern, and then anywhere up in Monmouth County, northern Monmouth County area.
Right. Now, we know as just being part of the team for the last 4 years, but the local hold that you guys have just walking around and going to different restaurants and stuff like that. How important was that for you guys to keep the local businesses involved in what you were doing in terms of like the electricians, the plumbers, kind of giving back to kind of the community, since you guys have been in the community since Jump Street, even you growing up around here?
Yeah, I'm born and raised at the shore, and it's kind of nice to have started a company and kind of having roots down at the shore again. And yeah, like you said, we've known a lot of people over the years, so we have a pretty tight network of subcontractors that we use, that we trust, that we work well with. And yeah, it's going very, real well so far. We're trying to position ourselves in the market, especially to the extent we do retail business where we do construction for other people, that we're trying to do, real high end construction, but, at a more affordable price. Right. We feel like we see here at the shore, they're either super high end builders that are extremely expensive, or you get the other end of the spectrum. You don't really have people in the middle, which is kind of where we feel like we fit.
Yeah. And now where do you see, you're down to probably doing 1 or 2 a year, I would say, at this point. I mean, is it a kind of a growth thing, or are you just trying to layer in that retail business, for these people in with those 2 flips a year?
Yeah, we've typically done two to three, maybe spec new builds a year. We've done up to 5 in 1 year, but yeah, more recently, we never used to do any retail whatsoever, but we find it's a little difficult just to do have a construction company just doing spec.
Yeah.
So, Christian and I recently decided to get more involved on the retail side of it. For example, we're building a new home for somebody in Bradley Beach that we expect to start sometime right in the beginning of the new year in January. Which that'll be the first one we're actually going to be building a home from scratch. We've built homes where we sold it to someone in the middle of the process and then finish it and customize it to their specifications. But this will be the first time we're doing it, a full retail new build.
And then it'll just kind of go on the market, and whoever wants it, or will you kind of still have that off market feel where somebody could come in, a little bit, halfway through the project or 3/4 way through the project?
Yeah, it depends. Like we're about to start a new one in Avon. We just finished one in Point Pleasant that's going to get listed for sale right in the new year. The one in Avon, I mean, we tend to like to just kind of build it, get it almost, pretty close to the finish line before we actually list it. Ideally, right. That's the better scenario. But obviously, the one that we're doing in Bradley will be customized for that homeowner who owns the property right now.
Right. Now, I mean, for us, we're more of our last line of defense before closing, on the first equity funding side.
The face of the infamous committee.
Yeah,
if
the
you will.
committee.
But there's many people involved.
The
Don't worry, there's many people involved. You just get the brunt of the.
That's right. I know I'm the guy,
stuff.
the bad guy behind the black curtain.
I guess that was like,
Wizard of Oz, if you will.
right. That's kind of the point of, why we're having you on today. I mean, and, it's not the most fun job, obviously when things are buttoned up and it's just a rubber stamp, it's a lot easier. But what do you feel? What are your thoughts on that role for yourself? What do you really kind of look for first and foremost when you're receiving these deals from us? At the finish line, as they're all buttoned up and have all the conditions in a row, appraisals are done, title and everything is done. It's getting put onto your desk. Kind of take us through your thought process with Mark and the other committee members on how you're getting them to the closing line, closing table, or hey, we need a couple more things, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if you could look at my role within the company is I guess I'm a little bit of a guardian or a gatekeeper of I have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors because we have a fund, which is what how we lend money to real estate investors. And it's just important for us to do right by our investors, and just to make sure that we're really looking underneath the hood and making sure we understand what any particular loan looks like, what are the risk factors that we need to be aware of, and to make sure that we're also just adhering to our our offering docs in terms of what we told our investors we were going to be investing in,
sure,
and that we were going to adhere to certain underwriting guidelines. So that's kind of just, I guess, my mindset. Believe me, I mean, as a business owner as well, I mean, I only make money by closing loans, right? So I'm not in it to just try to deny and swat away loans by any means. I'm also realizing my loan officers can only make money if we get loans, closed and so on and so forth. So contrary to popular opinion or belief, we're really not here to say no and to deny borrowers. But at the same time, again, we have an obligation, a fiduciary obligation to our investors to make sure that we're doing right by them.
Makes sense. And two quick points there. So to be clear, you don't hate all borrowers that we have.
I am one of you.
Okay, all right, perfect. So we'll just get that out of the way very quickly. We'll get that out of the way. And then, I guess you mentioned the fiduciary role that you have to the investors. I think that kind of lends itself to, we're not fiduciaries by contract or anything like that, but it lends itself to us being fiduciaries for not only the borrower on that particular deal, because we do have a keen eye towards making sure that it does make sense for them, but also I feel like the borrowers that we have, lent to in the past, it's trying to make sure that we're here for the longevity of their loans as well. I think that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I think that you touched on it there. It's like we're always looking kind of bigger picture, longer term. We're not in it to make a quick buck, to just get a certain amount of loans closed in a given month, so on and so forth. Just do a loan to do it. And I think, to your point, we often realize in the underwriting process that maybe we uncovered something or noticed something that maybe even our borrowers didn't notice or realize, and we bring it to their attention. And it's like, all right, well, maybe this isn't the best opportunity. Let's move on and go find another one, because there's always other deals. But yeah, that's the way to look at it. Is I'm always looking kind of bigger picture, longer term, kind of health of our business, of our company, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, because that's Christian's big thing. It only takes a couple, in our business, it only takes a couple bad loans to, sink us, to a certain degree, whether that be default rates or whatever the case may, whatever that is. And, we do have guidelines in our business and in our company that I think have saved a lot of our borrowers from making some mistakes, or maybe, some of the calculators that we have, or some of the things that you guys have built out over the years have, offered our borrowers more than they even thought beforehand. Me and Ryan had a call with a really good borrower of mine previously over the last 3 years. And, he had nothing but good things to say about the education he's received from us, whether that be, different deals that he thought made sense when he just did his basic calculations. But then we, have our, super antiquated Excel sheet that maybe just spits out a little bit different information or a little bit more finer detail. And all of a sudden his eyes are open and, this isn't what I want to do, or, it isn't a good deal for us. So I think where a lot of borrowers think guidelines are built to kind of take deals off the table, I think that sometimes it's your own worst enemy type of situation, right? Like, you're so concentrated as a borrower that this is the deal, this is the deal, this is the deal, these are the numbers, these are the numbers. But then when you really break it down, just sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that's true for sure. For example, I look at like a FICO score. I personally hate FICO scores. I really, really, really do. But at the same time, we have to adhere to that to some extent because the secondary market drives everything, really. Right.
True.
So I'll be say, hey, well, you're the owner of the company. Why can't you just do the loan? What does it matter? Well, you want to have the most flexibility in terms of that loans that you close that you can then sell them into the secondary market if you had to.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then what happens is all these loans that are traded in the secondary market are typically securitized at some point. And we just, you really want to make sure that your loans kind of meet and adhere to a lot of those guidelines that are common in the secondary market.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And I think that's probably something that even we as loan officers maybe don't realize or factor in. Sure, we look at the long term, but maybe not for one particular loan where that process goes. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think in that same kind of parallel, you've been in the business obviously way longer than us, but we're in kind of that valley right now where 2 years ago we were at the peak. So where have you seen guidelines change since the inception of first equity funding and especially hard money, because everybody views hard money as this get money quick kind of scenario, and 90% of purchase or 100% of purchase or whatever the case may be. How have you kind of seen guidelines shape and form and maybe even become a little bit more conventionally paralleled than maybe years prior?
Yeah, well, first thing I would just say is that even the term hard money, I don't really consider us to be hard money lenders per se. I know that's what's used in the street and so on and so forth, but I really don't view us as that. I think that has a little bit of a negative connotation, where it was like a kind of financing of last resort for people that were not very qualified, and that's not really what we're doing. I don't think you were implying that at all, totally. Jack, but when I hear hard money all the time, I just wanted to make that quick point. But yeah, going back to even the beginning of this year, right? We're not 23 yet. The market was really the best days, really. You were getting the most leverage, the best pricing. Underwriting guidelines were fairly lax, I thought. Easily getting 90% and 100 and all that. And what you've seen now, as we've seen what's happened in the market with all these inflation concerns and this really big rate move really fast, that people are really pulling back on their leverage a little bit in the secondary market. Really, looking at guidelines a little closer, adhering to them a little more stricter. I don't know if the right word, strictly, I guess I should say. And it's what you would expect in this environment, because there's a lot of concern about where we're going in the real estate world. Affordability is not nearly as good as it was in the beginning of this year. And there's a concern that there's going to be, a softening in the real estate market. We're already seeing it a little bit, of course. No one really knows exactly where this is going to go as we cross into 2023. I think the consensus seems to be that we're going to have in some sort of a recession, but is it going to be a mild short-term recession, or is it going to be a deeper, longer-term recession? Those are the kind of things that people like myself are wrestling with in this industry.
Yeah. And I think it has, keeping your eyes forward instead of, like you said, even with good loans and bad loans, have to get these loans done. I think keeping your eyes forward and bigger picture kind of prevents you from, maybe being caught by surprise on those type of things, like, guideline shifts and things like that. If you can kind of sense things and remember history, or remember patterns, you're kind of maybe when that guideline change or that leverage change comes, you can say, okay, I kind of saw this coming in a certain degree.
Yeah, you just want to be as reactive as possible to what's going on in the market. And like I said, you have to sacrifice some short-term, loan origination volume just to try to, safeguard yourself and your investors and your capital and so on and so forth for that bigger picture view. A lot of times I'll have, a loan officer, a borrower say, hey, yeah, but so-and-so is doing 90% or I'm like, well, that's fine. They are now. Who knows if they will be in a few weeks or a few months, and what is it ultimately going to mean for them at some point if they've originated a bunch of high leverage loans in a difficult market, and what is it going to mean for them down the road?
Yeah. So, and I think that's, and Ryan can, we can, I guess you could comment on this as well. Through COVID, through, all that was going on for that. Now we're in this inflationary period where things are changing every day. You and Christian have been nothing but nimble throughout. whether that's good or bad for us as loan officers, but, just in terms of security, in terms of feeling like, there's always going to be a place to go no matter what, in terms of the office or having the company, on its feet, never once has there been a feeling of like, oh no, what's going to happen next? I think you guys have been super proactive in terms of positioning us in, the right spaces to continue to do these loans and continue to have outlets to do these loans and things like that. And I think that's commendable in itself in terms of just the way you guys run things around here. And
I totally agree. And I think, again, it just goes to the what John's been saying throughout the whole time is of the bigger picture, but also, again, not for just us, not for just themselves, but for the people that we financed properties for already and look to do so in the future. I mean, I think that's a huge part of that mobility or nimbleness while we're making up words here. Like, I think that's a huge testament to you guys and, the company itself and just, the committee, if you will, the overarching committee, I think is a huge, huge part of all that. I mean, not to get into like specifics or really pin you down on anything, but do we think, because I know I guess while we're talking about underwriting a little bit and guidelines, like a big question for me that I get asked a lot is like, really pertains to seasonality or seasoning periods, not seasonality, seasoning periods for our investments, for the 30 year. Do we see any type of like 6 month seasoning or shortening of that coming back or any type of like 5+ unit space, anything like that?
Yeah,
in the long term,
it's really hard to say. I mean, the 5+ was starting to become, more widely available towards the beginning of this year until things really started going south on all of us.
Yeah.
So, I do think that'll be down the road again. As far as the seasoning, I got to be honest. I know it's, I get a lot of pushback on that. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I really don't. It's kind of an important aspect, and if nothing else, it's a big factor in the secondary market, like I said, in the securitization world. So I honestly don't see that. Certainly not in the environment that we're in now. So I would think I wouldn't be counting on that anytime in the beginning of next year or even next year at all. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Like you said, things change quickly, things evolve. You have to be nimble. And I'm not ruling it out, but I just don't think it's right around there.
In the forefront. Okay.
And I guess in that same vein, it's DSCR, and me and Brandon joke about it all the time. It's the hottest acronym, even though it might not be an acronym in real estate. I mean, you come, I got into the company pretty much like 2 months into me being with the company. It kind of was debuted on our side, that kind of strong 30-year fixed, 30-year amortizing loan of no doc, that was no doc, that was built for investors. How have you kind of seen that change this space? Like, how much has that kind of really turned this space up a notch with that offering?
Yeah, it's been amazing. The growth of this product at DSCR, the landlord or rental loans, whatever you want to call it, has been really amazing. Back, like when you were saying, Jack, was it 4 years ago?
It's like 2018.
Yeah. So like we were talking closely with some of the larger institutional investors in the market, saying like, we really got to have this product. And they're like, yeah, I know. And so we've really pushed from our end with people that we had, a good relationship with to say, hey, we really got to get this off the ground. And luckily we had another person at a large, private equity fund that kind of agreed, and we were able to push it through. And it's been great. It's a great product. It makes so much sense. It's something that was really lacking in the market at the time, but it is amazing how far it's come over the past 4 years or 4 or 5 years. It seems to be so many other lenders now have this product where very few had it, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And, that's good and bad. I guess it's ultimately good to have more. It's more institutionalized. We have, borrowers have a lot more options. And, I think it's a good thing overall for the market.
Yeah. And I just think it offers just kind of everybody an opportunity now to get involved in real estate and really kind of, show it. But, just for, it's powerful when conventional institutions are now offering it as well, whether that be,
in a broker capacity or something.
Yeah. Even just holding it onto their own, whether that's PRMG, we know personally, or just, maybe some bigger banks that are, offering this kind of DSCR loan. I just think that it goes to show, kind of how far it's come, but I guess my question is, we're now 4 years in, right, to having that kind of program. What do the stats look like, now that we're kind of seeing, we're getting towards the end of maybe some of those earlier prepayment penalties and, earlier loans that we did in 2018, kind of what do those, stats look like in terms of default rates and things like that? Is it still a kind of very strong program and all that kind of stuff, even with everything kind of going on?
Yeah. I mean, the really good thing is I think overall that the products perform pretty well. I mean, it's very different from what we experienced back in 2008 on the mortgage crisis that we talked about earlier on the show, where there was some really poorly underwritten loans and in the subprime kind of time frame where people were just lending money to borrowers just totally were not qualified. In this case, these DSCR loans are pretty well underwritten. It's usually to somebody that, the property's cash flow, which is the most important thing. And Definitely. It's performed really well. The default rates that we're seeing from where we sit and across the industry are still pretty low. Nice.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of always my big thing on the phone is, you get these, you get some borrowers that are, combative in terms of this numbers work, these cash flows, but we want to see that strength in cash flow. That's where, we're not going in there and digging through, tax returns, W-2s, personal income. That's our really big ticket, that appraisal, that, cash flow number. That's our big ticket. And, that leads me into the next thing. And I don't know if Ryan, has seen it just yet, in some of his deals, but, where do you see appraisals and that side of the business kind of going as we're moving, whether it's through this, period of volatility or kind of, hitting just the middle of it? How do you see appraisals kind of coming into play going through next year and the strength of those, whether that be, declining market or market rents being changed and all that kind of stuff? We're kind of, maybe creeping into a time where things were at their max and now maybe they're starting to soften a little bit, like you said. Yeah. How important is that appraisal now, kind of going to be moving forward from a an underwriting or committee standpoint? How much are those being really digging through as we're...
Yeah, I mean, appraisals are critically important and vital because kind of like what you said, it's a little bit of a trade-off. We're not looking closely at the borrower's financials really, but we really need to understand the collateral that's securing the loan and to make sure that it does cash flow properly. So I think what you're going to see in the short term as far as appraisals, you're going to see us, lenders requiring, comps that are more recent, comps that are closer by, not further away, things of that nature, just to try to give us more comfort, more security that in this potentially, declining real estate market that we could be comfortable that the appraisals as accurate as possible. And, we definitely realize that often sometimes they are too conservative and our borrowers do sometimes know their market certainly better than we do when it's not an area that we know.
Right.
And I realize that. I always try to tell our appraisers to please just give me an accurate value. I don't want it to be too conservative, but I just want it to be as accurate as possible. But now more than ever, it's really, really important. The appraisal itself is critical.
Yeah, it's great. And declining, that doesn't necessarily mean 10%, 12%, 13%, difference from year to year, but maybe even just 2 and 3%. That changes a lot, because if that's, going to happen each and every year, it all adds up. You know what I mean? So
yeah, especially when you're lending upwards of 90% up front,
Yeah.
Which I know 85% is more common or even less in some cases. But yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's just one factor. But if you're in a declining market, which, we haven't seen in a while, you have to just be a little bit more careful, be a little bit, make sure these appraisals are as accurate as possible.
Right. And what might be some compensating factors or something to help maybe strengthen in a situation where we get either a declining market or maybe even taking a step back, somebody who's a little bit newer in the game, but also trying to get off the sidelines at this point because they're seeing maybe a little bit more opportunity to get their offers accepted over these last, few months. What might be something that would help them, kind of get through our underwriting process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, we're always trying to look at the whole picture. We're not going to be a stickler to any one guideline and be like, absolutely no. It's not that we're just checking a box saying, you don't meet this, you're out. It's really not the way we do things. We're always trying to look at the whole picture. So to your point, Ryan, if someone maybe has a little bit of a lower FICO, well, what are some of the compensating? Maybe if we lend to them at a little bit lesser leverage or so on, or do they have more experience and things of that nature that would be a compensating factor. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at.
maybe more liquidity or something like that as well?
Yeah, liquidity is always great. If someone is maybe has a little bit less credit, we feel more comfortable lending to them because they got better liquidity situation. That's a great example.
Sure.
And the reason, like when you see these guidelines, the reason is because, as lenders, we're always looking back and seeing how our portfolio performs.
Right.
And there tends to be a common theme. Certain things, like whether it's lower FICOs, are obviously tend to have a little bit higher default, lesser experience on bigger scopes of work. Those are ones. So those are all things that we're looking at. On the fixed flip side, experience is critical, right? We're more comfortable with a new person if it's a very small scope of work. And we're really not comfortable if they're trying to do their first one and it's a large scope of work.
Yeah.
Things like that. I know it seems like it's all common sense, but there's a give and take for sure.
You just kind of walked me into my next. That was going to be my next question. Was really that, it is that first question on the phone. Credit, experience. Give me some background on yourself. Whether I'm talking to a new borrower or whatever. And when you're breaking down experience, you want to see that people have their hands dirty in that deal. Not necessarily we're a broker on the deal or whatever the case may be, or just the realtor on the deal, or I, helped out a couple buddies. Break down for us kind of that experience nugget. How much of that is so key, and especially, you had said scope of work and things like that, but kind of walk us through that. Because I know it. High experience, high scope of work, or high rehab budget. Is usually okay, but then there's some moments where maybe they have one flip and it's maybe I don't know. I just think that experience sometimes is such a broad word, to some borrowers and to some investors. Just kind of break down what you're looking for, from them in terms of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Jack, a lot of times people say, "Oh, yeah, I've been involved on this deal, or I was part of a group," and that's all fine. But until you've truly kind of done it, from kind of soup to nuts, beginning to finish line, it's hard. You really need that hands-on experience. That's not to say that if you're an architect or a general contractor or a realtor, of course, that all factors into play and it gives us a comfort level. But, to truly be considered experience, you have to have really done it, been involved, rolled up your sleeves. And I say that only from even personal experience, haven't done, I don't know how many fixed flips. We've done probably upwards of, north of 50, I'd say. We're still learning. Things are popping up that we never experienced or saw before.
Right.
And that's why it's just so important. Example, just the property we just bought in Avon. I kind of made a boneheaded mistake. We did a tank sweep. I always do that. Make sure there's no tank. There was one. We got it removed. So feeling good. And then, I walked through the front house, but there's a back house and there was an existing oil tank back there that we missed.
Right.
Not the end of the world. We're getting it removed, but it's something I should have caught. And so it's just things like that pop up and come up.
Yeah.
And all these different types of real estate transactions.
And especially in this market where, where we saw lumber up, 50%, 60%, or whatever the case may be. And just little things like that, like being able,
100%.
well, that's the thing, right? So like being able to kind of be, nimble enough, and there's that word again, but, nimble enough to go back on your own experience and know who to call, where to go, how to do all those things, because that kind of jump in just labor prices or just material prices could sink a deal where you maybe asked us for, 80% of the purchase, 100% of the rehab. That rehab number was $50,000, but now all of a sudden materials are up 30%. And now that $50,000 turns into 60, 65, 70. And now where's that money coming from? Because unfortunately we can't, loan modify or anything like that at that point, so I just think that having that experience is crucial. And it's something that you guys dig deep on. And we're also starting to see now that we're a couple years into the DSCR product, that the experience question is now dipping into that as well. Yeah. And how are you guys viewing experience on the DSCR side? Is it just owning a home? Is it owning multiple rentals? Kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it was typically more on the fixed flip side. We were more concerned about the experience, but like we talked about, guidelines getting a little bit stricter and a little bit tighter. That is one of the things we're noticing in the market is you're looking for a little bit more concrete experience, even on the DSCR landlord side of things. But yeah, I mean, at a minimum, we want to know typically that you've at least owned your own home, been able to kind of finance it, manage payments, things of that nature. And then, as far as whether you've done it, it's not a requirement that you've you've done it before per se, but yeah, it's something that we look at probably a little bit closer, but not as important as on the fixed flip side by any means, but it's a kind of a nice to have.
Yeah. Just kind of like what Christian had mentioned even, and a lot of people, even Ryan Charterino, like a lot of people mentioned, like the ability to go from 0 to 1 is so infinitely more of a milestone or a hill to climb, if you will, than going from 1 to 5 or 1 to 100, or because you have taken the time to manage those expectations, those timelines, those budgets, to be able to, deliver something on time or as close to on time as realistically possible. I think that's a huge part of the experience side of things, but also why, a JV or like being a realtor, while it certainly does have its experience requirements, and it does give you that experience, it doesn't necessarily give you that full scope of everything.
Yeah. And we always use the word, skin in the game type thing. And that's kind of like, until you really, had your own money and maybe you only had you were a small minority investor and you had a certain role, you were just a realtor or whatever, but we want to see people to have like put their money into it, gotten it from the beginning all the way to the finish line and experienced the full
Definitely.
cycle because like you said, whether it's with budget, timing, resale, there's a lot of various factors that go into play. If you're a realtor, you might be really good at what's the resale, but I'm not so good at getting it done in a timely fashion on budget, because maybe you don't have all those subcontractor relationships where you can get someone to do something for you at a better price, a little bit faster. Because as we all know, the longer things go on, there's more risk involved, more risk associated with it. You're more exposed to market, more exposed to risks, and all those various things that go into play. Which is why timing is everything in this business, especially on the fixed flip side of things. You need to get in, and you need to get back out of it in a timely fashion, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, what would be kind of your advice to the investors out there that are new, experienced, whatever the case may be, just kind of in terms of ducks in a row, when getting these deals on the table, or getting your prep work to started to kind of make that underwriting process easier. We've talked experience, we've talked FICO score, we've talked appraisals. Kind of what is your best way to kind of prep a deal, even maybe before you even contact me and Ryan? What are some of the things that maybe you and Christian go through, or as your team, or what's kind of your best advice on that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is whatever your first investment or whatever you get involved in, make sure you really know the market really well. Like, and I mean that by almost like a block to block mentality, so that you really, really understand it. Within even a given municipality or town, I mean, different neighborhoods have different characteristics and positives or negatives and things of that nature. So I think that's really the most important thing, is to know the market really well. And then from there, you got to have a really well thought out scope of work, I'd say. You got to really think about it. You got to plan for contingencies too, things that might pop up that you're not aware of right now.
Yeah.
So you definitely want
Second
to
oil
factor
tanks.
that in as well. Yeah, exactly. So that's another big thing. And then, it's just important to have a pretty good financing partner and have a good relationship with guys like, Jack or Ryan. You got to, because, it's important that that if I have a deal, I have a lender that can help me get it done and get it financed. And where we, we say what we do what we say we're going to do, and that we can be relied upon and trusted and things of that nature.
And how important is it to build that team, even at somebody at zero experience? How important, you've done all the research, you've done all the reading of the books, you've gone to the, the meetup events, how important is having that team, contractors, plumbers, even if it's just a referral, how important is that to have at your disposal, when you're doing, when you're kind of just getting started?
Yeah, it's really, really important for sure. I mean, like I said, helps you keep on budget, on time, and all those things, and the quality. You really need to know who you're giving the jobs to, who your subcontractor you're using. So it's critical. And then just little things like towards the end, do you stage the property? A lot of times I think a lot of investors don't give the curb appeal aspect of things enough weight. Sometimes they do a good job on the inside. You pull up to the house and there's no real landscaping and things of that nature, which are really important. And like I said, staging can go a long way as well. So all those things are factors. But yeah, I mean, your team is everything, and it takes time to build up a trusted team. We've been at this for, the better part of 10 years, and we're still, finding new and subs that are either maybe better, more reliable, so on and so forth. So it's an ongoing process. And when you're new to it, for sure, it's something that you have to, is really, really important to try to get good referrals, people that do good work in the area and are trusted, and so on and so forth.
Totally.
All right. Well, I mean, I know you got to get back behind the curtain eventually, so
Yeah,
we don't want to keep you. But any last thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of what, as the underwriter, and or as a committee member, what is something that you feel like you could peel the curtain back for, for an investor, just kind of, not humanizing yourself, obviously, because you're a great guy, but that, just make them kind of understand where you're coming from and kind of your thought process. I feel like we've done a great job, throughout the conversation doing so, but just, how would you feel, how would you kind of explain the committee to a borrower that just kind of maybe walks off on the street and is looking for you?
Yeah, like I think I mentioned it earlier. I mean, it's hard for them to understand that there's this whole big secondary market that kind of drives everything out there, and it's what drives a lot of our underwriting decision making. So that's really what it is, and there's a reason for everything, even though like they may not understand why we're doing it. There is a reason. It's from past experience, knowledge of seeing certain loans perform, certain loans not perform, and don't take it personally, for sure, right? Like
right.
You're probably a great guy. I have nothing against you at all. I really don't. And if for some reason you get a loan denied for whatever reason, I mean, don't,
It's certainly not a personal reflection.
Exactly.
Right.
It's certainly not personal at all.
No.
I can promise you that. And it could be because we just can't know the understand where we're looking at it from, right? We're not boots on the ground like you are. So you have to understand that a little bit too, I would say. Yeah, and as far as looking out to the new year, I'm pretty optimistic. It's been a tough year. It's been a crazy year, highs and lows. And I think the worst is behind us. I'm really hoping. And I think as we go into next year, it's probably more towards the middle or latter part. I really think you're going to see guidelines loosen up a little bit, leverage come back. I hope and think pricing will improve.
Right.
It's hard to say, right? It's really hard. I'm not trying to make a call here.
And we're not holding
we're not holding. Trust me, we're not holding you to that.
My gut is the worst is behind us, and I think we'll have some positive 2023 in our industry.
Just, I mean, I think you're seeing it here today with John, and the transparency and the willingness that he was to speak with Jack and I think that says a lot about John personally, but also our company. I think, in addition to the transparency that we've had in this conversation, I mean, and the transparency that I think Jack and I and a lot of pretty much every one of our loan officers here convey to our borrowers, like, what do you think maybe is a little bit different at the First Equity side of things from an underwriting standpoint than maybe some other more institutionalized lenders or even just other lenders in our space?
Like you said, Ryan, we're real people. I love to meet with borrowers. I'm always available. Anybody needs to reach out to me. I will second that. Yep. And I guess I just think we're a little bit different because I like to say we have like a 360-degree view of the whole industry since we've done almost every aspect of it, right? We've bought the non-performer. We've dealt with foreclosures, bankruptcies. We're a lender. We're a builder. So we've dealt with every aspect of it and seen it from every different angle. So I think we're just a little different than the average institutional lender out there that really is more sitting in the office and doesn't really have the hands-on real world experience that we have. So we kind of like know what shoes you're in because we're in them ourselves, and so I think that's what really makes First Equity different. Relationships to us are everything. And I think that's what, separates us a little bit.
And like you said, you guys use the funding, whether that be with us directly, whatever the case may be. It's like you guys have been through these processes in community banks and, in bigger box banks and even small lenders, small private lenders. So, you guys have that scope and that I feel like you guys truly do bring to the table more than maybe most that maybe just were, loan officers that created their own fund and are doing their own thing or whatever the case may be. But I just think that kind of experience as well, going through the motions and going through these steps help you guys, just kind of be more malleable when it comes to breaking down a deal and all that kind of stuff. I think that really helps and goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's true.
I agree 100%.
All right, cool. Well, John, I really appreciate you coming, man. I know that we tried to peg you down.
No
and
problem.
We finally got you.
We appreciate it.
But we really appreciate it. And I think that, again, any investors or borrowers that are watching this, whether you use us or not, it's just a good way to kind of understand where, the committee or the underwriters are coming from. There is a bigger, badder person out there that they have to answer to, at some point, and that's where these guidelines kind of come into play and where these kind of decisions come into fruition. And I just think understanding that as an investor and as a borrower, makes the relationship with a lender, that much easier, because you're more willing to, ask those questions. Does this deal make sense? Is this deal going to work? Is it not? And,
why is it not? If it's not. Like,
right.
A lot of the times you'll get that from us. If we can give it to you, we're going to give it to you.
Correct.
The why we can't do
totally. And it's just, there's no money in being stubborn, and in my eyes.
Or not closing loans.
Right. And that's not why we're here. We're not here to kind of, say, oh, your deal stinks, get it away from us. That's the last thing that we want to do. We want to offer our education as much as we can. And we'd love to learn from you as well. Why do you think it works?
Definitely.
And how can we work with John and you and be kind of the middleman to,
right.
hopefully, because there's been situations like that,
Definitely.
where, I don't love it. All right, let me talk to the borrower. All right, he says this. Can we look into this a little bit more? Yeah, let's look into this a little bit more. I like it a little bit better, but I really don't love it yet. What else is there? And like you mentioned, is there liquidity? Is there experience? And those are all huge compensating factors that, these underwriters and committee members do take into effect. They are people. They are human beings. They are not reptilian, scaly human, alienoids. But, I just really appreciate you being on here and kind of, peeling back that curtain for our borrowers and our investors, just to kind of, give them that relief or that, kind of comfortability with knowing, my deal might not be perfect. It's perfect in my eyes, but in the grand scheme of things, it might not be as good as I thought, or it's a home run. And those are the ones that you love, where it comes across the table and boom, 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 2 rubber stamps and it's on its way. So
I love those.
I really appreciate you coming through.
No, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
I guess Merry Christmas and
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. We'll see you coming into 2023.
Season 2.
That's it.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.